Hi everyone, I'm Matthew and I'm one of the actors at the theatre. I thought after my little video I made last time about an introduction to the clarinet, I thought today I would talk a little bit about the flute. Now the flute, like the clarinet and the oboe and bassoon and saxophone and recorders, is part of a family called the woodwind family. And it's called the woodwind family because originally these instruments were made of wood, and also you use air to make the sound, hence the wind part. So you're probably thinking this definitely isn't wood, and you'll be right to say that because this is actually silver. This flute is based on like a 19th century design of flute where they started using metal instead. So this is like most flutes you get today, and the different use of material allows you to have a lot wider range of volumes and colour of sound. So yeah, so that's why they've changed it to a metal. But some people still do use a wooden flute, but it depends on what you're playing. Maybe it suits the context of the piece better to use a wooden one if you're playing earlier music. But for most modern flutes and what people learn on today at school or have lessons outside, you would tend to use a flute like this. And the flute is slightly different to other woodwind instruments because on a clarinet, which I showed you last time, for example, you have the thin piece of wood called a reed to make the sound. And on an oboe or a bassoon, you would have a double reed, which is almost like two pieces of wood together, which vibrate together to make the sound. On a flute, you don't have that. You just literally have a metal tone hole, and you use the air to blow across the hole, like you would on if you were blowing into like a bottle to make the sound. So you're just blowing across the hole. So as with the clarinet, the flute also breaks down to carry it around to make it a lot simpler to carry. But the clarinet broke into 5 pieces, if you remember. This actually breaks down into 3. So you have this part here, which is the bit you use to blow into, and that's called the head joint. Then you have the longer part here, which is called the body joint. It's kind of like a person, really. So you have the head and the body, and they slide together like that. And then you have the foot joint, and that just slides onto the end like that. So when you start to learn the flute, normally you just have a few lessons just beginning on the head joint to try and create the sound. So like I said, you just blow across the hole. And then that can be, you can change the frequency of the pitch by covering the hole at the end to be lower. Or sliding your finger in. Like that. So when you put the flute together, then as you put your fingers down on the instrument, you're actually lengthening the tube, so that's what makes the pitch go lower. So you can just hear that just with my fingers. But if I blow as well at the same time. So the flute has a slightly reduced range compared to the clarinet. It doesn't go quite as low, but it does go high, but probably around the same as the clarinet. So if you hear a few examples of low notes, and then I'll play a few high notes. That's your low notes, and then some high notes. So like the clarinet, the flute also has a family of its own. So you have the flute, and then you have deeper flutes called the alto flute and the bass flute. Because of self-isolation, they're actually not with me here, they're at my family home. But I do have with me my piccolo, which I'll show you now. So it's probably different to what you expected. My piccolo is actually made of wood. So you can get piccolos that are made of metal, which is probably what you would see more frequently. I just prefer this because I think it's got a more mellow sound. Yeah, and I find that a lot of the professional piccolos are usually made of wood, but they still have their metal keywork, the same as the flute. So if I just play you a bit of that, and you can see this is to extend the range of the flute upwards. And you would normally find a piccolo, like the E-flat clarinet, you would use it more in modern orchestral work, but it's used more commonly in like military or marching bands or wind bands. So if I just play you a bit of the piccolo. you can hear the difference how high it is. You don't really find that they write for piccolo low because you would think they would use the flute, which makes common sense. But it's used more for the high notes, so I'll give you an example of that. So that's my brief introduction into the flute. I will be expanding on these videos over the coming weeks, but I just wanted to give you the basics. Some of you may never have heard a flute or seen a flute, so it's just more about that really, and introducing the instrument and letting you have a look. Yeah, so just to finish with, I will be playing a flute piece, which I recorded previously, and my friend Jung Si Yong is playing the piano for me. So enjoy!